The wind rolled across the open fields like a warning, carrying the sharp scent of pine and cold earth. It was the kind of wind that made even strong men pause before taking another step. That night, under a pale sky, a fine racehorse trembled at the edge of the woods. Its coat, once brushed until it shone, now held dust from a long and confusing journey. The horse's ears flicked at every sound coming from between the trees. Something moved in the shadows, soft at first, then steady. The animal knew the sound. Wolves, more than one. The story of how a prized racehorse ended up abandoned on the edge of a forest began earlier that same morning. The wealthy man who owned it had been known across the region for his sharp voice, polished boots, and endless string of victories at races. Folks around him believed he had everything a man could want. But inside his grand house, he carried a bitterness that money could not smooth out. He paced his stables with a restless glare, frustrated that his horse, once the fastest on the track, had lost 2 races in a row. What he called failure others would have called a small setback, but he had never been a man patient with disappointment. Stable hands kept their heads down as he passed. They knew the horse well. Some whispered that the animal had strained itself during the last race and needed rest. Others said the owner pushed too hard, expecting perfection without pause. Yet no one dared speak those thoughts aloud. Not to him. Just after sunrise, the owner saddled the horse himself. He led it down the road without telling anyone where he was going. The animal followed quietly, trusting him despite the tension in his shoulders. They traveled miles through wide fields, past quiet barns and fences worn from years of wind. When they reached the forest, the man loosened the reins and stepped away. He looked at the horse with a coldness that made the air feel even heavier. Without a word, he turned his back and walked off, leaving the animal standing alone at the tree line. The horse watched him disappear down the road. It waited, thinking he might return, but the man never looked back. He kept walking until the soft clop of hooves faded behind him. When the horse finally turned toward the trees, its breath came out in a shaky cloud. Something inside it sensed danger. The forest felt too quiet, too still, except for a low rustle somewhere deep inside the brush. Hours later, a hunter traveling through the area found tracks in the dirt. They were fresh. He recognized the prints of a well-bred racehorse. He also noticed a second set of tracks weaving through them, wolf tracks. The hunter straightened up and listened. He heard only the wind, though he felt something hanging in the air, something off. He followed the prints a little while, not sure what he would find. Every few steps he would pause, crouch, and study the ground. When he reached the edge of a clearing, he stopped abruptly. There, in the fading light, he saw the horse. It stood frozen, ears forward, eyes wide. Just beyond it, half hidden by brush, glints of movement slid between the trees. The hunter did not move any closer. He knew better than to rush into a situation he did not fully understand. Instead, he stayed still, watching. The wolves were not snarling or charging. They circled slowly, keeping distance, almost curious. He counted 3 of them. Their eyes reflected the thin light glowing faintly. The horse seemed confused more than frightened, stepping back but not bolting. That, to him, was strange. A horse should run. A horse should sense danger and flee. But this one held its ground, trembling but steady. The hunter whispered to himself, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. He thought about the wealthy man who owned a horse matching this description. Everyone in town knew the animal. People talked about the speed and grace it once showed on race days. They also talked about the owner, the pressure he put on his animals, the temper he kept hidden beneath polished manners. More than once the hunter had seen the man pushing the horse too hard during training. He had always wondered if the animal could keep up with such demands. The hunter stepped back behind a tree, wanting to stay unseen. He watched the wolves again. One of them lowered its head, nose close to the ground, sniffing near the horse but not lunging. The horse tossed its head but stayed still. A quiet tension filled the clearing, the kind that felt ready to snap but never quite did. Back on the road, far away, the wealthy man walked faster than before. He told himself he had done what needed to be done. A horse that no longer won races had no value to him. He convinced himself the forest would take care of what he could not be bothered with. Wolves were common in that region. He expected nature to handle the fate of the animal. He did not give it another thought. But as he reached the first bend in the road, a wagon passed him. The driver nodded politely, not knowing what the man had just done. In the back of the wagon sat a young girl holding a basket of feed for her family's livestock. She smiled as she rode by, unaware that only a short distance away, a frightened racehorse stood surrounded by wolves. The man turned his face away, uneasy for the first time since he left the animal. Something bothered him for reasons he could not explain. He quickened his pace, hoping the feeling would fade, yet it clung to him like dust to boots. Meanwhile, the hunter at the clearing made a decision. He stepped slowly from behind the tree, raising his hands to show he carried no threat. The horse noticed him first, shifting its weight anxiously. The wolves noticed him next. They turned their heads toward him in unison, watching him carefully. He kept his voice low and steady. He knew sudden moves could turn the moment from uneasy to dangerous in a heartbeat. The wolves did not growl. They simply watched. Their calm puzzled him. He waited, testing the air, the silence, the distance between himself and them. Something about the way they behaved felt unnatural for wild animals near vulnerable prey. They were not acting like hunters ready to strike. They seemed to be studying the horse, almost guarding it rather than stalking it. The horse's nostrils flared. Its eyes darted from the wolves to the hunter, unsure whom to fear more. The hunter took one careful step forward. That small movement caused the wolves to shift, forming a loose arc. They blocked his path, not aggressively, but clearly. The hair on the back of his neck prickled. It felt like the wolves were warning him to stay back. He spoke again, soft and steady, telling them he meant no harm, but the wolves held their ground. Their calm eyes, alert bodies, and quiet presence made him rethink everything he assumed about animals in the wild. Something unusual was going on, something he did not yet understand. He backed away slowly. The moment he did, the wolves relaxed into their loose circle again. The horse lowered its head, as if sensing the change in air. The hunter stepped behind the tree once more, steadying his breathing. He knew he could not leave things as they were, but he also knew charging in would end badly for everyone involved. He looked around, thinking about the nearest farmhouse, how far it was, who might be strong enough or brave enough to help if he sent for them. But even as he planned, he kept watching the wolves and the horse, unable to look away from the strange scene unfolding before him. He whispered a single thought to himself. If the wealthy man had believed the forest would swallow the horse without a trace, he had been terribly wrong. Very wrong, because something was happening in that clearing. Something no one would have expected. And the hunter knew the next moment could change everything. The hunter stayed hidden behind the tree, gripping the rough bark as he tried to steady his thoughts. He knew these woods well enough to understand normal wolf behavior. They were cautious, territorial, and quick to seize an opportunity when prey wandered too close. Yet the way they circled the abandoned racehorse was nothing he recognized. There was no hunger in their movements, no lunging, no harsh breath. They moved with a strange patience, a slow rhythm that made the horse tremble but not flee. It raised too many questions for him to ignore. He remembered hearing stories from old ranchers, men who claimed certain animals carried a spirit of their own. They said some creatures had an instinct that drew other animals to them, not to harm but to guide. Most folks dismissed those stories as talk meant to pass a long winter night. But watching the wolves move in that quiet arc, he began to wonder if those old tales had more truth than he once believed. The horse shifted again, planting its hooves firmly on the soft ground. Its sides rose and fell with quick breaths. The hunter could see the animal was tired. Maybe it had wandered the woods for hours, desperate for a path back to open land. He imagined the long journey from the moment the wealthy man walked away. The horse must have followed the road for a time, waiting for its owner to return, only to turn into the brush when hunger or fear pushed it off the beaten path. The hunter felt a tightness in his chest. He knew abandonment when he saw it. The animal had been raised to trust humans, to depend on them. Now it stood surrounded by a danger it did not understand. Far off, a soft clatter drifted through the trees. The hunter turned his head and listened carefully. It sounded like someone walking with purpose, though the steps were uneven, as if the person carried something heavy or struggled with exhaustion. The wolves heard it too. Their ears rose as one, and the clearing grew tenser than before. The hunter wondered whether another traveler was approaching, someone who might complicate things even more. He stayed low and watched shadows between the trunks until a figure appeared on the far side of the clearing. It was the young girl from the wagon, the one who had passed the wealthy man earlier in the day. She held her basket against her chest, and her eyes widened the moment she saw the horse. She stepped forward, but only slightly, unsure of what she was witnessing. The wolves shifted, their bodies angled toward her but not aggressive. She froze in place. The hunter stepped out from the tree before she could make a mistake. His voice carried just enough to reach her without startling the animals. He told her to stay still and not come any closer. She looked to him for guidance and slowly lowered her basket. He motioned with his hand, encouraging her to move behind a nearby stump and wait there. She followed his instruction without argument. He approached her carefully and asked how she had ended up there. The girl explained that she had seen the wealthy man walking alone earlier. She remembered how strange it seemed to see him without his horse, and something about the look in his eyes had unsettled her. She told her father she wanted to check the woods before they headed home, worried something might have happened. Her father, busy dealing with a broken wheel on the wagon, told her to stay close to the road. But her curiosity had pulled her away. The hunter sighed, not angry but concerned. He admired her courage, though he wished she had stayed with her family. Now they had to find a way to help the horse without provoking the wolves. He peeked around the stump to check the animals. They still circled slowly, almost protectively. The horse's ears twitched toward the girl's voice earlier, but it remained focused on the wolves, as if sensing their intentions were unclear. The hunter whispered to the girl, explaining that every part of this situation was unusual. He reminded her that wolves rarely acted this calmly around a wounded or tired animal. She asked if the wolves were sick or injured themselves. He shook his head. They moved too smoothly, too organized for that to be true. She then asked if wolves ever watched over animals instead of attacking them. He did not answer right away. He could not say for sure. While they talked, another sound drifted faintly from the direction of the road. Hooves, not the panicked beat of a horse running, but the steady rhythm of someone riding with purpose. The hunter and the girl turned their heads at the same time. Before either could react, a rider appeared at the edge of the trail, pulling a small wagon behind a sturdy brown horse. It was the girl's father. His worried face softened when he spotted her, but he grew tense again when he saw the wolves. He dismounted quickly and kept low as he approached. The hunter motioned for him to stay quiet. Together they watched the clearing, unsure of what their next step should be. The father had brought tools to fix the wagon, not deal with a dangerous standoff between wolves and a racehorse. But once he saw the animal trembling among the trees, something changed in his expression. He recognized it, almost everyone in the region did. He whispered that the horse belonged to the wealthy man who always treated his animals like trophies. He said he wondered why such a fine racehorse was alone out here. The hunter nodded, feeling frustration simmer under his calm exterior. He explained what he had seen so far and how the wolves had acted in ways he could not predict. The father studied the animals with narrowed eyes. He had lived near these woods his whole life and had never seen wolves behave like this either. He wondered aloud if the horse had wandered near their den, if they were unsure whether to chase it away or investigate it. The hunter considered that possibility but felt there was something more to it. The father noticed the horse's trembling legs and the tension along its back. He knew the animal could not endure much longer. The hunter agreed. They needed a plan, but neither wanted to frighten the wolves into striking or scare the horse into a blind dash through the underbrush. The girl whispered that maybe the wolves were waiting for something. She could not explain why she felt that way, but she said their eyes did not look angry. They looked alert, almost cautious. The hunter found himself agreeing. He had seen angry wolves before, and this was not it. As the light began to fade, the clearing grew colder. The wolves tightened their circle by only a small measure, yet the movement sent a ripple of fear through the horse. The animal stepped back until its flank brushed against a fallen branch. The sound made one wolf lift its head sharply. The hunter tensed. The father gripped the handle of a small tool he carried. The girl covered her mouth, afraid to breathe too loudly. The wolves did not leap. They paused. Their eyes tracked the horse's movements with a strange intensity. The hunter wondered if they sensed something unusual about the animal, something he could not see. He remembered tales of animals with unique instincts, stories spoken quietly around fires, horses that could sense storms before the clouds even formed, dogs that refused to leave the side of someone who would later fall ill. Animals guided not by fear but by a quiet knowing. Could this horse be one of those creatures? He had no proof, only a feeling. But the longer he watched, the more convinced he became that the wolves were not interested in harm. They were responding to something else entirely. Still, they could not wait for the situation to resolve itself. Wolves were unpredictable. The forest was growing darker. The horse could collapse from fear or exhaustion at any moment. The hunter leaned close to the father and explained a plan. He wanted to draw the wolves' attention away from the horse long enough for the others to guide it to safer ground. The father hesitated, worried the wolves might react badly. But the hunter reassured him that if they moved slowly and stayed calm, they might succeed without causing a panic. The girl begged him not to risk himself, but he placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. He told her that sometimes doing nothing was more dangerous than trying something with care. She nodded, though worry lingered in her eyes. The hunter took a few steps into the clearing. The wolves turned their attention to him all at once. He raised his hands again, palms open. He spoke softly, telling them he meant no harm. The father moved slowly around the edge of the clearing, guiding his daughter behind him and toward the horse. The horse noticed them and flicked its tail nervously but did not bolt. The wolves began shifting again, almost confused by the change in movement. The hunter kept his voice steady. Everything hung by a thread? One wrong move and the moment could crumble into chaos. The girl took one more careful step, reaching out her hand toward the trembling racehorse. Her breath caught in her throat as the animal turned its head toward her. Then something happened in the clearing that none of them expected. The next morning brought a quiet kind of tension hanging in the air around the farm. The wind felt colder than the day before, and the shadows along the fence line seemed to stretch farther. The rescued racehorse stood near the stall door, shifting his weight now and then as if the world outside still made him uneasy. The man who had taken him in could see that fear hiding behind the horse's eyes. It was not the fear of a timid creature. It was the fear of something that had learned not to trust anything too quickly. He brushed the horse's neck and spoke in a steady voice, trying to calm both himself and the animal. The horse's coat looked cleaner now that the dirt had been brushed away, but the marks left by the careless treatment of his wealthy owner were still clear. Those marks were not only on the horse's body, but also in the way he reacted to every small sound. Each creak of wood or rustle of leaves made him lift his head fast. Word had already started spreading among nearby farms that the rich man had abandoned one of his finest horses during a trip through the area. No one understood exactly why he had done such a thing. Some whispered that the man was known for a cold temper and did not tolerate weakness in any form. Others said he had grown tired of losing money on racehorses that no longer brought him winnings. A few even wondered if there was a deeper reason behind it, something tied to old debts or grudges. The farmer did not care about the rumors except for one thing. If the man ever returned, he would likely want his horse back, and if he did, it would not be out of kindness. That thought alone made the farmer uneasy. He had known wealthier folks before and understood how they treated everything as property. The horse was no longer simply an animal in their eyes. He was an investment gone wrong, and men like that did not enjoy losing anything, even something they had thrown away. As the farmer worked around the stable, he noticed the horse kept staring toward the distant woods. It was not a casual look, it was fixed, almost watchful. The trees were quiet, yet the animal behaved as if expecting something to come out of them. The farmer walked closer and followed the horse's gaze. The thick line of trees appeared normal. A squirrel darted up a trunk. Nothing unusual. Still, something about the horse's uneasy attention made the farmer think there was more to the story of how this animal had survived. The farm dog had been restless the past 2 nights too, wandering near the fence and growling low at the breeze. Maybe the horse had been out there long enough to sense danger more sharply than any person could. By mid-afternoon, a neighbor rode up along the old dirt road. He greeted the farmer and leaned forward in his saddle with a look that hinted he brought news. He said he had seen tracks near the far riverbank that morning. They were not fresh enough to worry about, but fresh enough to remind folks that wolves still roamed the area. The farmer listened without showing the tight feeling growing inside him. He thanked the neighbor, and after the man rode away, he looked again toward the woods. The horse stepped back from the open stall door as if he understood the conversation. The farmer laid a hand on the stall latch, wondering how much of the world this animal had seen, and how much danger he had faced when his wealthy owner left him behind. There had to be more to it than a simple act of carelessness. Horses did not survive nights outdoors on fear alone. They survived by instinct and maybe by luck, but something in this horse's eyes said there was more to the story. Over the next several days, the farmer noticed a pattern. Every evening, just before the sun dropped behind the hills, the horse became restless. He would walk the length of the stall, pause, and stare toward the same side of the woods. It grew clearer that whatever he sensed, it had not gone away. The farmer wondered if the horse had formed some strange connection with whatever had spared him in those cold hours he spent abandoned. The idea sounded unlikely, yet animals remembered things in ways humans could not always understand. At the same time, other conflicts began to build. Supplies on the farm were running low after a rough season. Fences needed repair, and the fields needed attention. The farmer felt the pressure growing as neighbors faced their own troubles. Everyone depended on their land, and even small setbacks could grow into larger ones. The arrival of the racehorse added weight to the man's responsibilities, even though he did not regret taking the animal in. There was something about the horse's quiet strength that made him believe things might change. One night, a stranger stopped by the farm asking for water. He wore fine clothes beneath a dusty coat. The horse reacted the moment the stranger reached the gate, his ears pinned back. His body stiffened. The farmer sensed it too. There was something uneasy about the visitor's calm smile. When the stranger stepped closer, his eyes drifted toward the stable. He asked if the farmer owned many horses. His question seemed casual, yet it carried an edge just sharp enough to unsettle the air. The farmer answered carefully, trying not to reveal too much. The stranger nodded, thanked him for the water, and walked off down the road with slow steps. The farmer watched him disappear into the fading light and felt his stomach tighten. The racehorse remained tense long after the stranger was gone. Whatever fear lived inside the horse, the presence of that man stirred it deeply. This raised more questions about the rich owner who had abandoned him. Maybe the stranger was sent to find the horse. Maybe he already knew he was here. Over the next days, the farmer tried to uncover anything he could from those who had crossed paths with the wealthy man. Some said the man was dealing with financial pressure. Others claimed he had argued with partners in the racing business. A rumor even spread that he had lost an important race and blamed the horse for it. Whatever the truth was, the wealthy man was known for a sharp temper, and a sharp temper mixed with trouble never led to anything good. Meanwhile, the horse began to show signs of slow recovery. He started eating more. His muscles looked a little fuller. His steps grew steadier, yet the fear did not leave him completely. It stayed tucked behind his gaze like a shadow that followed him everywhere. One evening, the farmer walked him out to the pasture for the first time. The sky burned with streaks of red and gold. The horse lifted his head to the wind and breathed in deeply. For a moment, he looked almost peaceful. But then something in the woods shifted. It was only the faint sound of branches moving, but it pulled all the calm out of the air. The horse froze. The farmer held the reins firmly. He spoke soft words, trying to bring the horse back from whatever memory had grabbed him, yet the tension stayed. The farmer felt it too. He could not explain it, but the woods seemed to hold a secret tied to the horse's past, something that had not yet revealed itself. Every rustle, every distant howl carried a warning. Each day brought another hint that the story behind the horse's survival was far from simple. What the farmer did not yet know was that the stranger who had visited was not traveling alone. And the wealthy owner who had abandoned the racehorse had learned the animal was still alive. The days ahead would bring choices that would test everyone involved. The farmer could sense the storm coming, even if he did not know what form it would take. The tension grew thicker with each sunset. The farm, once quiet and predictable, now felt as if every path, every fence, and every shadow held part of a story waiting to break open. And while the horse slowly regained his strength, something else in the world was moving closer, drawn toward the very place where he now stood. The farmer understood only one thing for sure. Whatever had happened before was not finished. Something was returning, and the horse knew it long before any person could see it. The days that followed felt stretched thin, as if every hour carried more weight than the last. The farmer sensed changes in the air even before anything truly happened. The farm dog grew sharper in his pacing, circling the barn more often. Birds that usually perched near the stable roof now stayed farther away. Even the wind sounded different as it moved through the grass, carrying a faint edge that made the farmer look over his shoulder more than once. The racehorse sensed this shift even more strongly. His eyes often followed sounds that no one else could hear. He would lift his head fast, muscles tightening as if he expected something to appear. The farmer did his best to ease him through the training he had begun, hoping familiar routines would help the animal settle. Yet no matter how calm the days seemed, the horse reacted as though danger hovered just outside the edge of sight. The stranger who had visited the farm had not returned, but that did not comfort the farmer. The man's eyes had held a searching kind of interest, the kind that did not fade easily. The farmer kept replaying that short visit in his mind, trying to guess what the stranger had wanted. He knew deep down that the wealthy owner of the horse must have sent someone to look for him. A person with that much pride did not take humiliation lightly, especially when it involved something valuable. One evening, while repairing a fence near the backfields, the farmer noticed fresh tracks pressed into the dirt. Some belonged to deer, some to smaller animals. But there were others mixed in, wider, deeper, the kind of tracks that reminded him of how the horse had reacted each time he stared toward the woods. The farmer crouched beside the prints, brushing dirt aside with the back of his hand. They weren't from any livestock. They weren't from a dog either. They pointed toward the trees in a straight line, as if something had walked with purpose. He stood up slowly and glanced at the distant stable. The horse had been restless before, but this discovery made his earlier fear feel more reasonable. Something was moving near the farm, something that walked with intent. That night the farmer barely slept. Each sound outside made him sit up. The dog growled several times and paced near the front door before settling again. When dawn finally arrived, it came with a pale, watery light that did nothing to ease the unease in his chest. As he walked to the barn, he saw the horse already alert, head held high. The farmer stroked his neck, speaking quiet words to ease him. The horse's ears twitched at the faintest noises. The farmer checked the stall door and the windows, making sure everything was secure. He had a growing sense that someone or something was watching from a distance. Later that morning, a young boy from a nearby farm came by to borrow a tool. He shared that he had seen a group of riders on the northern road the day before. They weren't locals. Their clothes looked too new, their horses too well fed for simple travelers. They had asked him whether any farm in the area had taken in new animals recently. The boy hadn't answered them fully, only said he hadn't seen anything strange. But he admitted their questions made him uncomfortable. The farmer listened to the boy with a steady face, even though the news gripped him tight inside. Riders from the northern road likely meant hired hands, wealthy ones. People who followed orders without asking questions. The kind who didn't care about the harm they caused. Once the boy left, the farmer stood alone in the yard, feeling the weight of the situation settle heavily on him. He had taken in the horse out of simple decency, but now the trouble tied to this animal threatened to reach his doorstep. And despite the growing danger, he couldn't bring himself to regret helping the horse. Something about the animal's quiet strength made the risk feel worth taking. Days blurred into one another with growing tension. The farmer noticed signs near the woods more often. Broken branches, tracks where the soil had been pressed down recently. Paw prints that looked too large for a stray dog. The horse seemed to understand these signs better than anyone. He would stand still, gaze fixed on the tree line until the farmer gently guided him back. One afternoon, as the sun was dipping low, the farmer led the horse out for a short walk. The air smelled sharp and cold. The sky dimmed faster than usual. As they walked near the pasture fence, the horse suddenly jerked his head up. His entire body went stiff. The farmer followed his gaze. In the distance, between the trunks of the trees, something moved. A shadow at first, then a figure. It wasn't an animal. It wasn't a wolf. It was the silhouette of a man standing partially hidden by the woods. The farmer tightened his grip on the reins. The figure didn't move closer, but it also didn't turn away. It stood there long enough to make the farmer certain it wasn't a passing stranger. After a few breaths, the figure stepped back into the trees, swallowed by the shadows. The farmer brought the horse back inside fast, trying to keep his own worries from showing in the way he moved. He barred the stable doors and checked the windows twice. The horse paced in the stall, snorting softly and looking toward the woods again. That night the dog barked several times, louder than before. The farmer stepped outside with a lantern, scanning the fields. He saw nothing, but he felt eyes on him. He closed the door and slid the bolt into place, his heart beating tight and fast. The next day he rode into town for supplies, partly to stock up and partly to see if anyone else had seen strangers around. A shopkeeper mentioned that 3 men had passed through earlier that morning. They had asked questions about local farms and mentioned a missing racehorse. The shopkeeper said the men seemed polite, but their tone held a cold firmness that made people uneasy. They had left toward the southern road, but the farmer knew paths in the area looped around. They could easily circle back. When the farmer returned home, he saw fresh hoofprints near the edge of his property. The dirt was still soft where the prints had sunk in. Someone had ridden close enough to observe the farm, then turned back. As evening settled in, tension wrapped itself around the land like a tightening rope. The wind stirred the tall grass, making soft waves that looked peaceful but felt anything but. The farmer sat near the stable, watching the sky fade to darker shades. The horse stood quietly inside, but his eyes stayed fixed on the shadows. The farmer's mind raced. He knew conflict was closing in from more than one direction. Men were searching for the horse. Animals from the woods prowled nearer. The farm felt small compared to the growing forces pressing toward it. Yet he refused to consider giving the horse back. The wealthy owner had abandoned him without thought. The horse had survived fear, cold, and hunger. He deserved better than to be handed over to a man who saw him as nothing more than wasted money. As night deepened, the farmer prepared for trouble. He checked the barn doors, set a lantern inside, and made sure the horse had enough water. Every creak in the wind made him look up. Every distant sound felt like a warning. The moment the moon lifted above the trees, the dog barked sharply. The farmer rushed out. The light from his lantern shook across the yard. His eyes swept the fence line. Then he froze. Near the far corner of the pasture, just outside the reach of the lantern's glow, he saw movement. Not one figure, several, shapes shifting into view, riders. Their horses stepped quietly through the tall grass. They did not try to hide who they were. They only moved with steady confidence, as if sure of their purpose. The farmer felt his breath catch. He backed toward the stable slowly, not wanting to draw attention but knowing the men had already seen him. The riders halted at a distance, their outlines waiting under the pale glow of the moon. The farm, once filled with calm routines, now felt like the center of something larger and more dangerous than he had ever imagined. The horse inside the barn sensed the tension. His hooves shifted against the wooden floor. The farmer stood his ground, though his heart pounded with a force he could barely control. He knew this moment was not the end, but the part where everything tightened before breaking wide open. The conflict that had been quietly building was now standing at his doorstep, and the night held its breath waiting for what would happen next. The riders stayed still for a long moment, watching the farm as if deciding how to move. The farmer felt the cold pull in his chest, but he stepped forward anyway. He did not raise his lantern high, knowing bright light could give away too much. Instead, he kept it close to his side, letting the glow fall only around his boots. The dog stood near him, low to the ground with a steady growl building in his throat. One of the riders nudged his horse a step ahead. He shifted in the saddle and called out that they were only looking for a stolen racehorse. His words carried a tone that suggested he already believed the farmer to be guilty. The farmer did not argue. He only said the horse in his barn was not stolen. He explained how he found the animal weak, abandoned in the cold. The rider listened, but the farmer could tell he wasn't moved by the truth. Men sent for valuable animals did not often believe simple stories. Before the riders could make their next move, a sound rose from the woods behind them. Leaves rustled and branches snapped. The horses beneath the riders shifted nervously. The farmer's dog barked hard enough to break the silence. The riders turned fast, trying to see beyond the trees, but the darkness was too thick to reveal anything clearly. The farmer realized that whatever had been tracking near the farm all these days had now crept close. It was not the riders who caused the strong reaction from the horse each night. It was something else, something wild. The riders seemed to sense it too because their confidence began to fade. They whispered among themselves, unsure whether to hold their ground or retreat. The farmer stepped back toward the stable door, feeling the tension spread across the yard like tightened rope. He spoke gently to his dog, who quieted but stayed alert. The riders tried to keep their horses calm, but the animals stamped and snorted, picking up the same unsettled scent that drifted through the air. The farmer could feel it too, a cold weight that seemed to move along the ground like a low wind. A sudden cry echoed from the woods, not human, not horse. A sound from a creature with hunger in its voice. The riders panicked, their horses reared, pulling at reins. The men struggled to stay mounted. Whatever moved among the trees did not step into the open, but its presence was enough to weaken the riders' resolve. The leader shouted for his men to turn around. They hesitated only for a moment before pulling back, guiding their horses toward the road they had come from. They kept glancing over their shoulders as if expecting something to burst out from the trees. The farmer watched them leave without saying another word. The tension in the air stayed for a while longer, then slowly thinned as the riders grew smaller in the distance. He waited until their shapes vanished completely before lowering his lantern. The dog let out a soft breath. The farmer walked over to the pasture fence and studied the woods. The night stayed quiet. Whatever creature had called out earlier seemed to have moved on. He returned to the stable and pushed the door open. The horse waited near the front of the stall, eyes wide but calm. The farmer stroked his neck, whispering thanks for his patience and strength. He could tell the horse sensed the danger had passed for the moment. The air around them felt lighter, though still scattered with hints of what had almost happened. The next morning brought a gentle stillness that surprised the farmer. After such an intense night, he expected to wake to more signs of trouble. Instead, the land lay quiet. Birds sang as if making up for the silence of the night before. Sunlight washed the farm in soft gold, warming the barn roof and glimmering along the fences. The farmer stepped outside, letting the warmth settle into his bones. He examined the pasture and found no new tracks. The riders had not returned. The woods, which had felt so threatening during the night, now looked calm. He walked to the edge of the property and studied the tree line. Nothing stirred except for a few squirrels chasing each other over fallen branches. When he returned to the barn, he saw the horse standing quietly, ears flicking gently at the morning sounds. The farmer cleaned the stall, refreshed the hay, and checked the water bucket. While brushing the horse's coat, he could feel a new sense of trust growing between them. The animal leaned into each stroke as though acknowledging the farmer's effort to protect him. That afternoon, a neighbor stopped by to drop off a sack of feed. He had heard distant shouting the night before and came to check that everything was fine. The farmer shared that a few men had come looking for the horse but left before any trouble began. He didn't mention the presence in the woods. He felt that part of the story was better left quiet. Some things were best understood in silence. The neighbor shook his head at the idea of a wealthy owner abandoning a racehorse. He said it was proof that not everyone understood the value of what they had. The farmer nodded, thinking about how far the horse had come since that cold night when he first rescued him. The animal no longer trembled. He no longer looked like a creature lost or forgotten. He carried himself with steady dignity now. Over the next week, the farmer continued to watch the roads and keep an ear out for riders, but the men did not return. It seemed the presence in the woods had scared them enough to give up their search. Maybe they would go back to the wealthy owner with some excuse about the horse being taken too far to track. Or maybe they would refuse to follow orders that forced them into dark forests where mysterious creatures moved without fear. The farmer took this time to build new routines with the horse. He began training him in small steps, letting the horse move freely in the pasture before guiding him with soft commands. The animal responded with surprising intelligence, as though he remembered the rhythm of work he once knew. The farmer did not push him too hard. He let trust grow slow and steady. One day, while brushing the horse, the farmer felt a shift within himself, a realization that the horse was no longer a rescued stray but a true partner. The farm felt fuller with him there. Days were more meaningful. The farmer had once believed he was only giving the horse a safe place to rest. Instead, the horse had given him purpose in return. Weeks passed and spring approached. The land softened under warmer air, grass grew faster. Birds built nests along the roof edges. The farm began to feel like a place of renewal, washed clean of the shadows that once followed the horse. The woods remained quiet, but the farmer sensed that whatever creature had called out that night had only been passing through. It had played its part, frightening away the riders, then disappearing back into wild land where men had no business wandering. The farmer sometimes wondered what the wealthy man thought now, whether he regretted leaving the horse behind, whether word had reached him that the animal was still alive. But the farmer realized that these questions no longer mattered. The horse belonged to the life he had found here, not the life he had escaped. The farm community began to notice how healthy the horse looked. People who visited often paused near the pasture, amazed at the animal's posture and strength. Some said he looked like he came from a fine stable. Others said his spirit seemed calmer than most. The farmer accepted their compliments with a quiet smile, knowing the horse had earned every ounce of praise through survival and determination. With time, the horse helped the farmer in more ways than one, not only through work, but through presence. When the farmer walked across the fields and heard the sound of hooves behind him, he felt a peace he had not known in years. The partnership between them became a steady truth, one built on trust rather than ownership. The story of the abandoned racehorse spread across nearby farms in its own natural way. People began to share the tale of how a horse left for dead found a second chance. They talked about courage, about loyalty, about quiet strength. And though no one spoke openly about the night the riders came, many believed the horse had been protected by more than luck. In the end, the farm became a place where fear was replaced by purpose, a place where an abandoned racehorse found a home far richer than the one he left behind. The farmer no longer watched the road in worry. He watched it with appreciation, grateful for the day the horse came into his life. The woods stood peaceful again, the land grew warm, the horse flourished. And the farmer understood that some stories do not begin with victory. They begin with loss, with doubt, with danger, but they end with gratitude for what survived. The horse, once left for wolves, now lived in a place where he was valued every day. And the farmer, who never planned for any of this, found himself living with a renewed sense of hope. It was a reminder that even the harshest moments can open a path to something better. Their lives settled into quiet harmony, shaped not by fear, but by trust. And the story found its natural close with the two of them standing together in the pasture, the sunlight stretching across the fields, carrying no trace of the danger that once haunted the farm.